Welcome to Haunting Fear, horror stories we dare not tell. Your destination for the most chilling tales of human depravity, unsolved mysteries, and macabre truths. Tonight, we delve into 4 horrifying cases that will make you question the depths of human darkness. These are stories you've likely never heard before. Tales so shocking, they'll stay with you long after the video ends. But first, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. Your support helps us uncover the stories others fear to tell. And don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments below. Which case left you the most unsettled? Let us know. Now let's begin our descent into the unimaginable. Imagine calling for an ambulance in a moment of desperation, trusting that the people arriving would save a life. But what if those very people were calculating how much your life or your death was worth? This was the grim reality in the Polish city of Lodz during the early 2000s, where paramedics sworn to protect life became merchants of death in one of the most grotesque scandals in medical history. One such case involved 72-year-old Jan Kowalski, who had suffered a heart attack in his home. His daughter Maria made the desperate call to emergency services, believing she was saving her father's life. When the ambulance arrived, the paramedics assured Maria they would do everything possible. But what she didn't know was that Jan had been marked, seen as a low-risk target for survival. On the way to the hospital, the paramedics injected him with Pavilon. Maria would later recall how they told her he had died despite their best efforts, even consoling her as she sobbed. For years, Maria lived with gratitude for the paramedics' supposed kindness, until she learned the truth. Imagine the betrayal she felt upon discovering that her father had been murdered, not by some stranger, but by those who had promised to save him. And Jan was not alone. Similar stories emerged from dozens of families who were forced to confront the grim reality that their loved ones had been seen as commodities. The conspiracy began to unravel in 2002 when a whistleblower stepped forward. A junior paramedic known as Tomasz, new to the field, had overheard unsettling conversations among his colleagues. What he discovered horrified him. In hushed conversations, his colleagues discussed business arrangements with funeral homes. Tomasz overheard one paramedic joking about a good haul after an elderly patient passed away unexpectedly. At first, Tomasz dismissed it as dark humor, but the pattern became impossible to ignore. Eventually, Tomasz couldn't stay silent. He reported his suspicions to authorities, sparking an investigation that would unearth one of Poland's darkest secrets. The investigation was painstaking. Detectives combed through ambulance logs, medical records, and funeral home agreements. The first real breakthrough came when they identified patterns in Pavilon purchases, quantities that far exceeded what a paramedic team would typically require. The paramedics involved were shockingly brazen. Some referred to patients as prospects, discussing their value based on the likelihood of survival. Others boasted about their earnings, with payments ranging from $500 to $1,000 per body. But the most chilling discovery came in the form of a notebook, a small black ledger kept by one of the ringleaders. It contained a list of names, dates, and payouts, meticulously documenting the lives they had stolen. The trial was a spectacle. Families filled the courtroom, clutching photos of their loved ones, demanding justice. One mother, whose 80-year-old husband had died under suspicious circumstances, took the stand. Her voice cracked as she described how she had prayed over his body, believing his death to be natural. The courtroom fell silent as she pointed at the paramedic accused of murdering him, her voice trembling with rage. "You smiled at me. You told me he didn't suffer." The accused paramedic showed little remorse. One defendant, when asked if he felt guilt, replied coldly, "It was a job. People die every day." Another attempted to deflect blame, claiming he was pressured by his superiors. But not all involved were so callous. A funeral director, complicit in the scheme, broke down during testimony, admitting he had lost his humanity in the pursuit of profit. The fallout from the scandal was immense. Public outrage erupted across Poland, with protests demanding stricter oversight of medical and funeral services. News outlets ran harrowing stories, and trust in the healthcare system plummeted. The Polish government was forced to introduce sweeping reforms, but for many families, the damage was already done. The Skin Hunters scandal isn't just a story of greed. It's a story of betrayal, of lives reduced to numbers in a ledger. It forces us to ask, how far will people go when human life is weighed against profit? And worse, how many similar schemes might exist, hidden in plain sight, waiting to be uncovered? It is a chilling reminder of how greed can twist even the most trusted professions. What are your thoughts on this horrifying betrayal? Share them in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. And if this story left you stunned, make sure to like the video, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss another tale from the shadows. Now, let's uncover our next dark chapter. In the quiet town of Tayport, Scotland, 60-year-old Ian Coutts was a familiar figure. A reserved and private man, he had few close friends, but was well-liked by those who knew him. Ian lived a simple life, rarely drawing attention to himself. So when he suddenly vanished without a trace, it sent ripples of unease through the close-knit community. The last time anyone saw Ian was on a brisk evening in late 2019. He had been spotted leaving his modest flat, seemingly without incident. Days turned into weeks, and his absence became more troubling. Neighbors grew concerned when his mailbox overflowed and the lights in his flat remained off. Eventually, authorities were called to perform a welfare check. Inside, they found no sign of Ian, but what they didn't realize at the time was that they were stepping into the shadow of something far more sinister. David Barnes, a local decorator and an acquaintance of Ian's. To those around him, Barnes appeared to be an unassuming handyman, often seen working odd jobs around town. But beneath this ordinary exterior lay a man capable of unspeakable acts. Investigators would later uncover that Barnes had developed a twisted fixation on Ian, leading to one of Scotland's most chilling crimes. Barnes had murdered Ian in cold blood, though the exact motive remains unclear to this day. What is certain is that after the murder, Barnes went to extraordinary lengths to conceal his crime. He dismembered Ian's body and placed the remains in a wheelie bin, which he then locked inside an abandoned warehouse. For years, that bin sat undisturbed, hidden from sight as Barnes carried on with his life as though nothing had happened. But Barnes's deceit didn't stop there. Following Ian's murder, he began using his victim's identity to commit fraud. He gained access to Ian's bank accounts, withdrawing funds and making purchases. He even went so far as to impersonate Ian on official documents, further erasing any suspicion of foul play. For 3 years, Barnes lived off the spoils of his crime, all while maintaining the facade of an ordinary tradesman. The case took a dramatic turn in 2022, when an urban explorer ventured into the derelict warehouse where Barnes had hidden the body. The explorer stumbled upon the wheelie bin, its contents concealed under layers of garbage bags and duct tape. Driven by curiosity, they pried it open and made a grisly discovery: skeletal remains, carefully wrapped and hidden away. Shocked, the explorer contacted authorities, setting off an investigation that would unravel the chilling truth. Forensic experts identified the remains as Ian Coutts, confirming what his family and friends had long feared. The investigation quickly led to Barnes, whose erratic behavior and financial connections to Ian raised red flags. During police interrogations, Barnes attempted to deny any involvement, claiming ignorance of Ian's disappearance. But as investigators delved deeper, the evidence became undeniable. They uncovered CCTV footage showing Barnes withdrawing money from Ian's accounts, as well as receipts for items purchased using his stolen funds. Neighbors reported seeing Barnes entering Ian's flat in the weeks following his disappearance, further implicating him in the crime. A search of Barnes's own home revealed additional damning evidence, including personal belongings of Ian's and tools that matched the marks on the victim's remains. In court, Barnes's actions were laid bare for all to see. Prosecutors painted a chilling picture of a man who had not only taken a life, but had gone to extraordinary lengths to profit from it. The defense attempted to argue that Barnes was suffering from mental health issues at the time of the crime, but the jury was unconvinced. His calculated behavior and callous disregard for his victim's dignity left little room for sympathy. The verdict was swift: guilty of murder, fraud, and identity theft. Barnes was sentenced to life in prison, with a minimum term of 25 years. For Ian's family, the conviction brought a measure of closure, but could never erase the horror of what had been done to their loved one. The murder of Ian Coutts is a stark reminder that evil often hides in plain sight. A man like David Barnes, seemingly ordinary and unremarkable, harbored a darkness capable of unspeakable cruelty. His crime not only took a life, but left an indelible scar on a grieving community. Before we move to our next chilling story, take a moment to share your thoughts in the comments. What do you think about the horrifying betrayal in Ian Coutts' case? And if you're finding these tales as gripping as we are, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us uncover more of these dark, untold stories. Now let's continue. Katherine Mary Knight was, by all outward appearances, an ordinary woman. She lived in the rural Australian town of Aberdeen, New South Wales, worked in a slaughterhouse, and was known for her sharp wit and fiery personality. But beneath the surface lay a darkness that would ultimately culminate in one of the most gruesome murders in Australian history. Katherine's life was anything but ordinary. Born on October 24, 1955, she grew up in a chaotic household rife with violence and abuse. Her father was an alcoholic who regularly assaulted her mother, and Katherine herself endured years of sexual abuse by family members. This traumatic upbringing left deep scars that would shape her relationships and behavior in terrifying ways. Katherine began her career in the local abattoir, where her skills with knives quickly earned her a reputation. She treated her tools like prized possessions, even hanging them above her bed at home, a chilling habit that she maintained for years. Her co-workers described her as hardworking but volatile, prone to sudden outbursts of rage. Katherine's personal life was equally tumultuous. She had a string of relationships, each marked by violence and instability. Her first marriage to David Kellett was marred by Katherine's violent tendencies. On their wedding night, she tried to strangle him, angry that he had fallen asleep after only having sex 3 times. Despite this, the marriage continued, though Katherine's behavior grew more erratic. At one point, she even slit the throat of his puppy in front of him as a warning for what would happen if he ever cheated on her. Her next relationship with John Chillingworth was similarly destructive, but it was her 4th and final relationship with John Charles Thomas Price that would end in unimaginable horror. John Price, known as Pricey to his friends, was a father of 3 and a well-liked member of the Aberdeen community. By the time he met Katherine, he was divorced and looking for companionship. Initially, their relationship seemed promising, but it wasn't long before Katherine's violent tendencies resurfaced. She became increasingly possessive and controlling, threatening Price whenever she felt slighted. The breaking point came in early 2000. Katherine had discovered Price's will, which left his property to his children, and became enraged. She wanted him to cut them out and name her as the sole beneficiary. When Price refused, she attacked him, prompting him to end the relationship. But Katherine wasn't one to let go easily. She moved back into his house despite his protests, and Price, fearing for his life, sought a restraining order. Tragically, it was too late. On the evening of February 29, 2000, Katherine showed up at Price's home. Despite their strained relationship, she managed to charm her way inside. The two had dinner, and Price, perhaps wary but exhausted, went to bed. Katherine wasn't done. Sometime during the night, she retrieved one of her knives, one of the blades she had meticulously cared for over the years, and approached him as he slept. What happened next defies comprehension. Katherine stabbed Price 37 times with a butcher's knife, inflicting wounds so deep they punctured vital organs. Despite the severity of his injuries, Price fought back, leaving blood trails throughout the house as he desperately tried to escape. But Katherine was relentless. She overpowered him, finishing the job in a frenzied attack. The violence didn't end there. After ensuring Price was dead, Katherine skinned his body, a skill she had perfected during her years in the slaughterhouse. She then decapitated him and placed his head in a pot on the stove. If that wasn't horrifying enough, she prepared a gruesome meal, cooking parts of Price's body with vegetables and gravy. Plates were set on the dining table, each labeled with the names of his children. Investigators later found Price's body hanging from a meat hook in the living room. When police arrived the next morning, the scene was beyond anything they had ever encountered. A neighbor had raised the alarm after noticing Price's car still in the driveway and being unable to reach him. Inside the house, officers found blood-streaked walls, the smell of cooked flesh, and the meticulously arranged dining table. Katherine was found semi-conscious in the bedroom after an apparent overdose, having attempted to take her own life. Katherine was arrested and charged with Price's murder. During her trial, she showed no remorse, even attempting to plead insanity. However, the evidence against her was overwhelming. Prosecutors presented photos of the crime scene, forensic evidence, and testimony from those who had witnessed Katherine's violent tendencies in the past. The jury deliberated for only a few hours before returning a guilty verdict. Katherine Knight was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, becoming the first woman in Australian history to receive such a sentence. The judge described her crimes as so far beyond the pale that they warrant the severest penalty. Today, Katherine remains in custody at Silverwater Women's Correctional Center, where she is reportedly feared by other inmates. Her case is a chilling reminder of how unchecked rage and obsession can spiral into unimaginable horror. But rage doesn't always simmer behind closed doors. Sometimes it explodes into the open, catching an entire community off guard. In a quiet Swedish suburb, ordinary lives were torn apart when a seemingly unremarkable man unleashed a wave of violence that no one saw coming. What drives someone to shatter the peace of an unsuspecting neighborhood? Let's uncover the events of the Blekinge Street murders. Blekinge Street in Sweden was like many other suburban neighborhoods. Its residents were familiar with one another, exchanging polite greetings and living without fear. But all of that changed on the night of October the 16th, 2015, when an event occurred that would mark the community forever. Erik Lundqvist, a 42-year-old factory worker, had lived in the area for years. He wasn't the type to draw attention to himself. He kept to himself, completing his shifts at the factory and rarely engaging with his neighbors. But in the months leading up to that fateful night, Lundqvist began exhibiting strange behavior. He had grown increasingly withdrawn, avoiding eye contact, muttering to himself as he walked down the street, and refusing to answer the greetings of neighbors he had once acknowledged. Neighbors dismissed these signs as quirks of a quiet man. What they didn't know was that Erik had developed deeply troubling thoughts. He believed his neighbors were conspiring against him, monitoring his every move and plotting to harm him. This delusion consumed him, feeding an escalating paranoia that drove him further into isolation. On the evening of October 16th, Lundqvist acted on these delusions. At approximately 9:15 p.m., while most families were settling in for the night, he armed himself with a large kitchen knife and a hammer. Without any apparent hesitation, he left his home and walked 2 doors down to the house of an elderly couple who had lived on Blekinge Street for decades. When Lundqvist knocked on their door, the husband, Sven Karlsson, opened it without hesitation. He was met with an immediate, brutal attack. Lundqvist struck Sven with the hammer repeatedly, ignoring his cries for help. Sven's wife, Ingrid, rushed to intervene, but she too was attacked. Lundqvist stabbed her multiple times, leaving her lifeless on the kitchen floor. By the time the assault was over, both Sven and Ingrid were dead. Their home, once filled with warmth and memories, was now a blood-soaked crime scene. But Erik wasn't finished. He left the Karlsson home and moved methodically to his next target, a young family that lived across the street. Marcus and Anna Svensson were enjoying a quiet evening with their 2 children when they heard pounding on their door. Marcus went to investigate, opening the door only to be confronted by Lundqvist. Without warning, Lundqvist attacked him with a knife, delivering deep and deliberate wounds. As Marcus fell, bleeding heavily, he shouted for Anna to take the children and hide. Anna managed to barricade herself and the children in an upstairs bedroom, while Lundqvist continued his rampage downstairs. He overturned furniture and broke windows, seemingly searching for them. When police arrived minutes later, they found him standing over Marcus's motionless body, the knife and hammer still in his hands. The arrest was eerily calm. Lundqvist didn't resist. In fact, he didn't speak at all. He allowed the officers to handcuff him, his face expressionless. Neighbors who had gathered outside described the moment as surreal, watching a man they had seen in passing being led away in bloodstained clothing. The investigation that followed revealed a disturbing psychological profile. Forensic examinations showed that Lundqvist was suffering from untreated paranoid schizophrenia. His delusions had reached a peak, leading him to believe that his neighbors posed an imminent threat to his safety. Psychiatrists explained that his mind had constructed an elaborate narrative where everyone around him was an enemy, plotting his demise. The trial was emotional and contentious. The prosecution presented evidence that Lundqvist had carefully chosen his weapons and targeted specific neighbors, arguing that his actions were premeditated. They contended that, despite his mental illness, he understood what he was doing. The defense, however, argued that Lundqvist's actions were driven entirely by his delusions and that he was not in control of his faculties at the time of the murders. The court ultimately sided with the defense. Lundqvist was found not criminally responsible due to his severe mental illness and was sentenced to indefinite psychiatric care. For the families of the victims, the verdict brought little comfort. Many felt the sentence was insufficient for the pain he had caused. In the aftermath of the murders, Blekinge Street was forever changed. The Carlson home remained empty for years, a stark reminder of what had happened there. The Svensson children were relocated to live with relatives, their young lives forever marked by the trauma they had endured. And for the neighbors who had witnessed the events of that night, the sense of safety they once felt in their community was gone. The Blekinge Street murders are a stark reminder of the dangers posed by untreated mental illness and the devastation it can bring to innocent lives. They force us to consider the importance of recognizing the warning signs and the devastating consequences when those signs are ignored. Tonight, we've journeyed through 4 haunting tales that uncover the darkest corners of human nature. From the calculated betrayal in the Skin Hunters scandal to the chilling discovery of Ian Coutts' remains, from Katherine Knight's unimaginable rage to the terror that engulfed Blekinge Street, each story reminds us how fragile life is when consumed by fear, greed, or madness. But what do you think? Which of tonight's cases left you with chills? Let us know in the comments. We want to hear your thoughts. And if these stories captivated you, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. Your support helps us continue sharing these chilling narratives. This is Haunt, Fear, Horror Stories We Dare Not Tell, where we unravel the tales that linger in the shadows and keep you looking over your shoulder. Until next time, stay watchful, because sometimes the greatest horrors are right in front of us, hiding in plain sight.